The chief executive talks about shortened waiting times for public housing applicants. An investigation into yesterday's high-speed rail delays continues. Hello and welcome to TVB News. Chief Executive John Lee noted that next year there will be an additional 2,000 public housing units available for half a year earlier than planned. This is expected to shorten the 4.5-year waiting time for public housing applicants. Meanwhile, Lee also emphasized on the importance of a peaceful and rational way to express views. Veronica Lin has the story.
To tackle the housing crisis, the administration proposed to build light public housing. The goal is to shorten waiting times for public housing to 4.5 years in the next 4 years. Whilst those homes are not ready yet, the current waiting time has already dropped from 6.1 years to 5.3 years. Chief Executive John Lee said in a wide-ranging interview on a TVB program that there will be 12,000 public flats ready for occupancy 3 to 18 months ahead of schedule. This will further shorten the waiting time to 4.5 years. Recently, there has been controversy surrounding the government's decision to take back part of the Fenling golf course for public housing development. Lee said the previous administration had made the decision, and legal procedure for doing that is already underway. When asked if the public would lose confidence if the government failed to follow through with the original plan, Lee said he didn't want to speculate. Meanwhile, Lee said he'd be pleased if some residents had learned lessons from the 2019 social unrest and stressed that any views, no matter how radical they are, could be expressed in a rational way. Noticeably, as Hong Kong returns to normalcy, there's been a sharp decrease in demonstrations compared with a few years ago. Hong Kongers' freedoms are protected by the basic law, said Lee. He added that as we exercise that freedom, keep in mind the rioters and revolution that tore the city apart. He believes residents are largely on the same page in that they all see the need to develop the economy. Take the Fenling golf course as an example, he said. There were different views, but they were expressed in a peaceful and rational manner. Veronica Lin, TVB News.
A signal failure occurred at the West Kowloon station yesterday evening, disrupting the high-speed rail train services for several hours. An engineering expert said the failure could have been caused by the turnout, a piece of equipment used for switching train tracks. Mimo Sangai reports.
On Sunday morning, passengers can be seen at the West Kowloon station a day after train services were disrupted. Some have suitcases ready to depart. The schedule shows the status of all trains as on time. However, some passengers said they had prepared a backup plan to ensure their journeys are not disrupted by another signal failure. For instance, this traveler said she would take coaches to cross the border in case of another accident. Similarly, this woman said her backup option would be departing via one of the checkpoints in the city. Owing to the signal failure, 4 trains to and from Futian and Shenzhen North were cancelled and more than 10 trains were delayed. A similar accident also occurred in May. After communicating with MTR, Roundtable lawmaker Michael Tian said the accident might have been caused by broken hardware next to a rail track, almost the same problem as previously. Tian said it shows the railway company has not been able to work with the software company to resolve the issue over the past 2 months, such as finding ways to detect hardware faults in advance. Vice Chairman of the Hong Kong section of the Institution of Railway Signal Engineers, Henry Zhern, meanwhile said 2 things could have led to the accident last night: turnout and rail track's power system. Memos 9, TVB News.
Starting tomorrow, the Food and Environmental Hygiene Department's hawker control personnel will be equipped with body-worn cameras. Authorities noted that the measure is being taken to increase the officer's ability to collect evidence and to record potential altercations. Timothy Lee tells us more.
The Food and Environmental Hygiene Department's hawker control force targets the city's hawker activities such as illegal obstructions on streets. Confrontations between FEHD officers and hawkers thus become unavoidable at times. Starting tomorrow, hawker control officers will be equipped with body-worn cameras to assist their enforcement work. The camera will be worn on a conspicuous position on the officer's body, with FEHD authorities emphasizing that officers will record under reasonable circumstances and possibly notify individuals who are being recorded. The government believes that the implementation of the device could help its frontline staff better monitor and regulate hawker activity, as well as tackle illegal hawker business expansions. The FEHD said the move is meant to reduce risks for hawker control personnel and to guarantee the safety of its officers and residents. One of Hong Kong's top hawker street obstruction black spots is Mong Kok's Flower Market, where altercations between shopkeepers and FEHD personnel are commonplace. Some local vendors welcome the new measure, but added that authorities should step up efforts to reduce the number of street obstructions instead. Footage recorded on the body-worn cameras would be used during investigations, but if such footage were found to be of no use to the investigation or for other legal purposes, they will be destroyed 31 days after the initial recording. The FEHD noted that it has already taken into account similar actions and training processes adopted by other government departments. One such force to have implemented the body-worn camera were the police, who began using the device since 2013. Timothy Lee, TVB News.
Overseas, there has been more destruction and rioting in France, with Marseille being the latest hotspot with hundreds of arrests. But across the country, things were quieter as anger simmers following the deadly police shooting of a teenager. Authorities made 700 arrests on Saturday, lower than the day before. The Interior Ministry called it a calmer night. David Garrett reports.
Gérald Darmanin is on the front foot. He greeted and thanked officers ahead of the trouble in Marseille and spoke in advance about sending extra squads to southern cities. Darmanin said some of the arsonists they've arrested were as young as 12. 45,000 police officers were deployed nationwide. The beefed-up forces were clearly visible in the early evening in Paris. There was a significant presence on the Champs-Élysées to protect businesses and monuments. They fired flash grenades to keep crowds away. Extra security presence or the president's appeal to parents may have worked. Paris was more subdued and the number of arrests was down nationwide, although there were still pockets of unrest in the French capital. Cars were damaged and fires broke out as some rioting continued. The authorities were quick to move in if they saw antisocial behaviour. People were stopped and asked why they were on the streets, but following the police shooting, there is deep distrust in some communities. These people say they were stopped 4 times just because they looked black and Arab. The home of a mayor in a southern Paris suburb was ram-raided and set alight while his family were asleep. Vincent Jeanbrun from the conservative Les Républicains party was out at the time. Authorities are treating the incident as attempted murder. Hundreds gathered to pay their respects as Nail M was laid to rest on Saturday. It was a private funeral ceremony. The public outpouring of grief and rage still continues days after his passing. David Garrett, TVB News.
In the Netherlands, King William Alexander has apologized for the royal house's role in slavery 160 years after its legal abolition in the country. He was greeted by cheers when he asked for forgiveness at an event commemorating the end of slavery. Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte made a similar apology last year. "I feel the weight of the words in my heart and my soul," the king said. The apology comes after hundreds of Suriname nationals and people of other former Dutch colonies in the Caribbean took to the streets of Amsterdam during a colorful march on Saturday. Slavery was abolished in Suriname and the Dutch colonies in the Caribbean on July 1st, 1863. But most of the enslaved laborers were forced to continue working on plantations for a further 10 years. U.S. Central Intelligence Agency Director William Burns said decoupling from China would be foolish, given the deep economic interdependence, and the U.S. should try to diversify its supply chains. Burns made the remarks during a lecture in the UK. The CIA chief said, "In today's world, no country wants to find itself at the mercy of a cartel of one. for critical minerals and technologies. The answer to that is not to decouple from an economy like China's, which would be foolish, he said. Instead, countries should sensibly de-risk and diversify by securing resilient supply chains, protecting their technological edge, and investing in industrial capacity. In British Columbia, Canada, several thousand unionized port workers went on strike after failing to reach a deal to renew an industry-wide contract that expired in March. Representatives of the Provincial Employers Group and Workers' Union met for 2 days of talks. The British Columbia Maritime Employers Association said a tentative agreement could not be reached. Members of the International Longshore and Warehouse Union Canada were on strike across the province. The dispute is over a collective bargaining agreement covering about 7,500 employees and 30 terminals. Business groups say the strike could seriously affect Canada's economy and small enterprises and urge the government to ensure port operations continue. And still ahead, the Ukrainian president calls for international attention to a Russian-occupied nuclear power plant in the south. Europe's Euclid Space Telescope launched to study dark matter and dark energy of the universe. And a hailstorm causes property damage in the northeastern province of Heilongjiang. Welcome back. Russia launched an overnight drone and missile attack on Kyiv and the surrounding area after a 12-day break. A Ukrainian military official said all 8 drones and 3 cruise missiles used in the attack were shot down by air defense systems. Both sides claim to have attacked enemy targets, with Moscow saying it has repelled a number of offensives. Belarus, meanwhile, appears to be building a military camp to house fighters from the Wagner private army. Nazvi Karim has more.
Up to 8,000 of the 25,000 Wagner fighters may join their exiled leader Yevgeny Prigozhin in Belarus. Lukashenko, at a Belarus Independence Day ceremony, said citizens need not worry about Wagner's Russian convicts because they either died in the war or will not be allowed in. He also pledged that the Russian nuclear weapons deployed in the country will not be used as long as they are in Belarus. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky visited the city of Rivne, near the Belarus border, where one of Ukraine's 5 nuclear plants is located. Earlier, during a press conference in Kyiv with visiting Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez, Zelensky called for greater international attention on the Russia-occupied Zaporizhia plant in the south. He said there was a serious threat that Russia is ready to provoke a catastrophic local explosion at the station. Moscow called the accusation preposterous. Sanchez said Spain will provide weapons and 55 million euros for Ukrainian reconstruction.
Spain will soon deliver new heavy materials to help in the war effort, including 4 Leopard tanks and armored personnel carriers. We are also about to deliver a portable field hospital with surgical capacity. This element should enhance Ukraine's capacity to heal wounded soldiers and civilians near the front line.
On the war front, Ukraine says 3 civilians were killed and 17 injured after Russian shelling in eastern Donetsk. 5 were wounded in Kherson after 82 Russian attacks using artillery, drones, mortars and rockets. Officials have reported heavy fighting in Bakhmut, Liman and Marinka. Nazvi Karim, TVB News.
A European space telescope blasted off Saturday from Florida in the U.S. on a mission to explore the mysterious and invisible realm known as the dark universe. The European Space Agency's Euclid Observatory was launched towards its ultimate destination, 1.5 million kilometers away, which is the Webb Space Telescope's neighborhood. It will take a month to get there and another 2 months before Euclid starts its 6-year survey this fall. Flight controllers in Germany declared success nearly an hour into the flight as the telescope phoned home after a smooth liftoff. Euclid is named after the Greek mathematician known as the father of geometry. Scientists hope it will glean insight into the dark energy and dark matter that make up most of the universe and keep it expanding. In the U.S., more teens are getting weight loss surgeries after the American Academy of Pediatrics gave the green light for this. But some experts have warned that the procedures are not for everyone. This report from NBC News.
She wears short skirts, I wear t-shirts.
17-year-old Ivan Chavez is living life to the fullest. These days, you can find him rooting for the Texas Rangers at the ballpark or belting out songs at a packed Taylor Swift concert. But just 3 months ago,
I used to not like taking pictures. I used to not like being in pictures.
At his heaviest, Ivan was over 300 pounds. In March, doctors performed a sleeve gastrectomy, a weight loss surgery that typically shrinks a patient's stomach by 60 to 80%. Since the procedure, Ivan has lost 55 pounds.
Whenever I'm looking at old photos, I'm like, oh wow, this was me a couple months ago, and this is me now.
Is this something that you could have done with a traditional diet?
Absolutely not.
A recent study showed a near 20% spike in weight loss surgeries among youth between the ages of 10 and 19. And for the first time in 15 years, the American Academy of Pediatrics took a major step by endorsing the procedure as an option to treat severe obesity among teens aged 13 and older.
It involves medical clearances from subspecialists, including gastroenterologists, psychologists, nutritionists.
But some doctors are skeptical, arguing kids may not understand the lifestyle changes that come with the surgery.
If you're telling a kid you're going to need a lifetime of medical care and close follow-up, they may not be prepared for that.
Dr. Edward Livingston used to perform weight loss surgeries on teens.
I've seen a lot of people with bad results, including people who were fairly young when they got these operations.
Post-surgery, what are some of the side effects that kids could potentially see?
The biggest one is the micronutrient deficiencies. The body's going to be absorbing a whole lot less in terms of caloric intake.
Ivan now follows strict dietary restrictions and has made major adjustments to almost every aspect of his life.
I could have easily served myself a full plate. Now I'm serving myself on a salad plate. I'm feeling really good.
He says it's all worth it.
I'm looking to lose around another 50 more pounds.
All while gaining a new lease on life. Kathy Park, NBC News, Dallas.
The mainland's northeast experienced a hailstorm yesterday morning, with the largest hailstone measuring 9 centimeters. Several buildings were damaged, but no injuries or deaths were reported. The hailstorm occurred in several districts of Ning'an City in Heilongjiang Province. Heavy rainstorms were reported on Saturday morning before it started to hail at around noon. Local residents said the hailstones grew in size over time, from pieces around the size of an egg yolk to ones larger than a tennis ball. Several windows were smashed. That's the news. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.